Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. This is CNews Interview, an initiative by the Media and Communication Studies batch of 2016 and 18. I am Divya Swami, your host for today. We have with us today Cristina Yovick from the United States of America. She is currently working at Christ University's International Admissions Department as a volunteer. She holds a bachelor's degree in sociology and anthropology and an MS degree in education for counseling. Thank you, Cristina, for being with us. Welcome to Christ University. So how has your journey in India been so far?
It's been really adventurous. I guess I don't even really know where to start, but I got here in early July and I immediately fell in love with India and all of the places that I was visiting and the people that I was meeting. I was visiting friends from back home even that came back to visit family. So at this point, I don't even want to leave.
Okay, so what inspired you to come to India and work with the International Students Office?
Well, the inspiration to come to India is a little bit predating my inspiration to work with international students. But in the early 2000s, I started studying different religions, more so like Eastern religions, Hinduism, Buddhism, Taoism, and I just really, really took a liking to Hinduism. So I actually started studying South Asian culture. I started studying Nepal, India. I even had Pakistan in there. I mean, I just started studying everything that I could and learning everything that I could about religion in South Asia. So that eventually led to my studying sociology and anthropology and focusing on cultural studies. And later, I just eventually kept meeting international students as I was going through my undergraduate journey at my institution back home. And as I kept meeting international students, I just, I just had this craving to explore new places and to leave my own home and just see what else was out there in the world. So, when I decided to join my master's program for my counseling degree, I immediately jumped into our international admissions department at my institution. And working there was awesome, but I didn't really know how to empathize with international students that were coming to America. I thought initially that I knew how to, but I didn't really know how to. So coming here, that inspiration was I not only wanted to come to India. After a while, my studies solely focused on India only. After that, though, I knew that this was the right place to come, sort of twofold reason, to kind of get that initial, all those things that I had studied, finally experience those things, because you can't really experience things only through research and studying. And then to work with international students here so that I can bring that empathy back home to students.
So what are the general problems faced by international students in the United States of America?
Well, I mean, initially, sometimes they experience culture shock. I'd say most of the time they experience culture shock. It's a new place. It's almost like a whole new world at that point. And students generally, find a little bit of, I think, trouble depending on where they are, maybe making new friends. So at my institution back home, I was a part of a few committees that helped international students in making a new domestic buddy and showing them places around town, helping them figure out how to navigate the city, how they get just basic everyday needs, is the essentials that they would need to survive, like what stores should they shop at, and then helping them with things like even just converting money. What is considered expensive? What product do you really not need because it's just not necessary? So when we work with international students back home, we try to take in just any issues that they would have at all. And then, at some point we deal with students who have homesickness, and we try to hold cultural events that kind of give them a little piece of home, or hold potlucks that have food from their home place so that they kind of have a little bit of home with them too.
So you worked with international students back home, and you yourself came down to India, and you've been volunteering for the past 5 months, if I haven't mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
So how has it been for you coping with an entire different culture, an entire different institution altogether?
Well, I think that I'm pretty thankful that I had studied so much about India, because there really wasn't much to shock me once I got here. One of my best friends actually comes from Hyderabad, and he and his family had me come and stay with them for about 6 days. And his parents had commented on like the second or third day, they started asking me questions like, how was my experience? How was I liking India so far? And then they commented on my total lack of culture shock, and they were saying things like it just felt like I totally fit in, and which made me feel good, because when I got here, it was sort of like I already felt like I was at my home away from home. So that was sort of like a validation from their observation.
So you'll be going back to the United States pretty soon. So
Yes.
what is that one thing you would take away with you?
Oh gosh, I've made so many new friends here, and the experiences that I have had here are just, they're almost undescribable in words for me, because it's just a feeling, it's an emotion more than it is words. I think that if I had to say anything that I would take away, I know now that going back into my profession in the United States, I definitely acquired, I think, in my opinion, that I acquired the ability to better empathize with students, to better sympathize with them, and to gain a better understanding. And I'm hoping to employ those skills very quickly. I'm hoping to find a job super fast when I get home.
Okay, so with regard to the experience you've had here working with international students and working with international students back at home, how different do you think is the experience an Indian has in the United States and the experience a foreign student would have in India?
Oh, wow. Okay, so I think if we're talking about American students coming to an Indian institution, I have actually talked to some of the American students that are on campus in the USAC program. So their experiences are all over the place. Some students had very little knowledge of India, Indian culture. I mean, there are still some people that think things like India is a Hindu nation and it's a secular country for religion. So there's definitely some confusion out there in the world about who India is and the people are. Experience-wise, I think that there are some things that students seem to get used to pretty quickly, but it's different than where they're from. Students that come more towards like my place, if they come from my place, like public transportation is not as abundant as it is here. So people were telling me like catch a bus, and I was like thinking that it was going to be like my place and that would be incredibly difficult. Like that, I was like, what's the schedule? They were like, buses run 24 hours, and I'm like, but what's the schedule? Like I just kept asking questions like I would ask back home. Other students seem to have adjusted pretty quickly. I don't know, I guess it's just really that component of the difference in culture and getting used to things here too. Like I get stared at everywhere that I go. The other students also have experienced that same thing. It's no matter what we do, who we're with, what we're wearing even, there's sort of this thing where just everyone kind of, their heads turn wherever we are.
That in fact would have been my next question. So how as a foreign volunteer in India, how do you deal with stereotypes that are generally pushed across to you?
I actually have experienced more toward the end of my journey, people saying some things to me that are a little bit more stereotypical. So I've run into some people, even just recently I had to take a friend of mine to the local hospital. And there was a really kind young man who helped us. We were just totally confused about a few things. And he just rattled off right away. He said, well, money should be no issue for you because you come from America, so you're probably very rich. And on the contrary, the one thing, I try to be humble in my responses because I don't like to brag. But the one thing that I'm proud of myself for is that I came to India because I gave up my home. I had an apartment. I gave it back to the landlord because I couldn't afford to pay rent and live here. I sold almost all of my things so that I could afford to buy flight tickets and to support myself while I was here for 5.5 months. So, I mean, when I go back home, I have to work again to get back on my feet to start basically adulting all over again, like a new adult. So when people have different stereotypes about like where I come from and the fact that they think I'm rich or something because I'm from America. I come from a very poor place and a very, very poor family. So I try to just, in the nicest way possible, in a professional way, you know, I use it as a teaching moment to say, we got to break down some of those stereotypes. We've got to break through some of those barriers.
So what would be your advice to a lot of Indians who aspire to move to foreign universities? So what would be your first advice to them as a counselor in terms of settling in a new place?
So I think once they actually get there, I think that it would be really important for them to make connections, not just with other students who come from where they're from, but with anybody that they can. I do notice at my institution specifically that students have a tendency to group with other international students that come from their country, and that's okay. You know, I know that that's cool for them. They can speak the same languages, or they can cook together, they can share, you know, apartments together and things like that. But then if they get stuck there, they're not making friends with the domestic students in the place that they are. And I know that they would have a lot to learn, and they could make a lot of really great friends if they would just branch out.
Okay, so Cristina, when would you come back to India again?
Oh gosh, I want to move here permanently. I don't know when I'll actually get a chance to come back, but I'm hoping that it's sometime very soon.
And what would you do when you come here the next time?
Well, let's just cross our fingers that the reason why I'm coming back is because I get hired somewhere. I hope I get a job here.
And what do you plan on doing in the United States once you move there?
So the jobs that I'm exploring right now, because I'm going to have to find a job pretty quick. So I'm looking at higher education institutions and working with international students. And I'm even looking into some recruiting companies too, to recruit international students to work for, or to go to school at different institutions.
Okay, Cristina, thank you so much for joining us. I hope we see you again in India as soon as possible. This is Divya Swami signing off on behalf of the entire batch of Media and Communication Studies, batch of 2016 and 18. Do stay tuned for more.